Now that we understand light logic a bit more from having our one direct spotlight on our simple object, we should be able to do this mechanical object drawing in a way that has a skill set already built. So it should be probably a little bit easier, but still some challenges given the different designs and shapes and textures that mechanical objects tend to have. So as you can see, I have 3 man-made objects. I want you to choose 5. I'm gonna do 3 just for the sake of trying to show how to draw in a short amount of time over video. But I've still have my objects underneath a spotlight. I have these cast shadows, which I'm gonna make sure to include in the drawing in order to really make the objects feel like they're on a surface, and also to make sure that the light that is hitting the objects makes sense. So I want to have that highlight, I want to have that core shadow, the mid-tone, I want to have the cast shadow, all the things and light relativity that I'm seeing, I'm going to include. So make sure you do that. I want you to try your hardest to make this an interesting drawing compositionally. So even with my 3 objects, you can see that it's a pretty interesting composition. It fills up the paper pretty well, and the negative space between the objects is kind of coming to life a little bit with these interesting objects. You might even consider playing with the scale. So you can keep this true to size, or you can push the scale. So in this demonstration, I am gonna start with the corkscrew, the wine bottle corkscrew, because I think that that's a fun one to teach and challenging in its own regard. I'm gonna have a lot of the same materials that I used before for the simple object drawing, reductive charcoal drawing. This won't be a reductive charcoal drawing. We won't start with the vine charcoal first, but we are going to start using vine charcoal. So we'll need vine charcoal, your soft and medium pencils, your erasers, maybe a variation of size of erasers for those tiny little highlights, and a blending stub. That'll be good for this. Before I get into the details of the wine bottle opener, I am first going to cite out the composition of my multiple mechanical objects that I have. I'm also doing this from a bird's eye perspective as well, so you might want to consider maybe drawing all of them at one time. Like you could set all 5 up on a piece of paper really close to your piece of paper so you can look down on top of them. Or you can sort of cite out each individual object, plan it out where it goes on your piece of paper, and then start going in and actually drawing one object at a time. That's how I would recommend doing this. So I'm just gonna start by citing out everything first and just kind of really consider the edges of my piece of paper to make this an interesting composition. Okay, so now that everything is all laid out how I want it to be on the page, with my vine charcoal still in hand, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just kind of shade in the bigger shadows that I see. And the vine charcoal is great for this because we're gonna keep it, pretty light, and then go back in with the charcoal pencil for when we are ready to really commit to where we want those darker values to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the wine bottle opener, and I'm going to grab my medium charcoal pencil for this. and also have this tiny little eraser that I chopped handy. All right, so I have my vine charcoal already kind of laid down here. I'm gonna go in and start to just look at the shapes of the shadows. One thing that really helps too for objects that are more complicated like this with a lot of tiny nuances like the corkscrew, one thing that I like to do is I like to count how many diagonal lines in the corkscrew I see. So the way that this corkscrew is shaped is it kind of comes up like this, and then I see that it is kind of, it's round like that, comes back up, and then there's like this diagonal going this way. I'm just gonna erase out that vine charcoal with my finger. So there's one diagonal there, and every diagonal is parallel to each other. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of those diagonals. Counting really helps me to find out how many tiny little nuances I'm looking at. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just make little hatch marks for those, and then I can kind of go in and start to draw that corkscrew. And I'm also really working off the center line that I created that cuts right through the middle of the handle. So this is that sighting tool coming in handy. So I need to really try to center these diagonals a little bit more here. And then I'm just gonna go in and, like I said, with my charcoal pencils, really find the shapes of the darker shadows. And for anything that has color, like metal, you know, that one's pretty easy to see the high contrast because this metal is a gray color. So we're able to see the darks and the lights pretty easily. But then we have this glassy colored part of our wine bottle handle here. And for the most part, that is pretty dark. My image or my still life of my mechanical objects is really high contrast. So I'm gonna squint my eyes, and I'm gonna see that when I squint my eyes, that the value of this glassy floral kind of handle of my wine bottle opener is really pretty dark, a dark value. So I'm gonna have that kind of match this metal side over here. I can focus on my bottle opener a little bit. So you can see when I was doing this, I was really drawing a lot with the leftover charcoal on my blending stub. That's a really great way to lay down shadows with just a different width of surface to draw in. So keep that in mind as a tool. When I'm looking at this, we got this bottle opener. We have like a really intense high contrast. The metal of this is really, really dark. So I can just even go in like this and really start to draw in those shadows. two things actually that are gonna be really helpful for you when you're doing this is if you happen to have any lettering on any of your mechanical objects, like mine has the word KitchenAid written on the handle here of my bottle opener, I recommend just squinting your eyes. Don't even try to write out the letters. It's funny. You want to actually just look at the shapes and not the actual letters. Letters are just shapes. Another helpful thing that I wanted to mention is, let's say I needed to work on this some more, on my corkscrew some more, but I didn't want to put my hand on top of this KitchenAid drawing area, or like the bottle opener. If I didn't want to put my hand here and draw this, grab a spare piece of paper, set it down on top of the drawing that you made, and then you can, you know, work on whatever you need to without smudging whatever part of the drawing is underneath your hand. And try to tackle this. What might be actually even more complicated than the wine bottle opener is this tea steeper. I know I have this like darker shape. What I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to draw in all those tiny little holes. So I'm gonna have to use like a pretty small eraser. You know, maybe I'll take my little eraser nub and maybe I'll sharpen it to a good point so I can erase out those dots, but that is just going to be a pretty big challenge. So the lesson in that is really just make sure that you keep all the details for last. So with this tea steeper, I'm going to try to make sure that I block in my coarse shadows, my midtones, and then, you know, erase out my highlights. So I'm gonna start smoothing all of this stuff over. And then after I smooth that over, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll start drawing in those little dots. I can count them out if I want to, but since there's so many, I think that if I can just imitate the same impression by dotting them out, that'll be good enough. One thing to keep in mind, everyone, is to make sure that you are doing justice to some of these double shadows. I have a double shadow going on right here on the tip of my spoon For some reason, I have all these different light sources going. I tried my hardest to get one spotlight, but I have a double shadow. So like we learned in the light logic video, with a simple object, we know that shadows are more than one value going from dark to light. And sometimes you have two shadows overlapping one another, like I do here.